1830. This is about categories on each census. 1830, free colored males and free colored females. Native Americans were in a category until the census in 1870. Over here. Before that, those who had assimilated or, quote, renounced tribal rule, unquote, were counted as either, quote, all other free persons, unquote, or, quote, free colored males and colored females, unquote. For those who lived with their tribes or on reservations were known as, quote, Indians not taxed, unquote, and were left out. The late appearance of a, quote, Indian, unquote, category on the census came several decades after a systematic effort by the U.S. government to dislocate and decimate the Native American population. This was added. Part of this effort began with the 1830 Indian Removal Act. Over 100,000 people were forced from their homes and at least 15,000 died during their journey west. Probably more than that. Oh, damn. Black slaves, black, mulatto slaves, white, Indian, Chinese. In 1865, the Confederacy lost the Civil War and the 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery. In 1868, the 14th Amendment affirmed that anyone born or naturalized in the United States was a citizen. To reflect those changes, the 1870 consensus no longer included the quote, unquote, black slaves or mulatto slave categories. The 15th Amendment granted citizens, including the new ones produced by the 14th Amendment, the right to vote regardless of race or previous condition of servitude, but only men. Reflecting Chinese immigration after the California Gold Rush, the 1870 census included in these categories by Chinese, unquote, the first instance of counting Asians' immigrations across the U.S. 1879, 1790, almost 100 years later. Japanese the first time in 1890. Quadroon, 1/4 black blood, 1/8 any other trace of black blood, respectively. These terms reflect the 19th century's attempts to support racism with science or pseudoscience, culminating in the 1896 court against Plessy v. Ferguson, which legally upheld racial segregation in the South. Shit. 1910, consensus including a question about Americans, quote, mother tongues, unquote, following an influx of Southern and Eastern European immigrants. While these immigrants were considered white, some groups were considered more desirable than others. Also in 1910, a racial category for, quote, other, unquote, appears for the first time. 1930, Filipino, Caribbean, Hindu, Mexican. The only time religion has been counted as a race. Mexican, however, the Mexican rejected being called as a racial category, and it was changed to white for future consensus. Consensus continued tracking language, however, in an attempt to track less desirable immigration groups. The 1930 consensus also reflected 1924 introduction of the quota system, allowing a certain number of people from certain countries to immigrate. This system favored Northern and Western European immigrants over the inferior races of Asia. Southern and Eastern Europe was a culmination of a series of racist immigration policies, beginning with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and continued to influence American immigration policies into the 60s. And that's 1930. American Indian, 1950. First time consensus responds to identify their own racial backgrounds instead of having them assigned by consensus takers. At the same time, with the addition of Alaska and Hawaii as states in 1959, the consensus included choice of natives for natives as those as Aleut or Eskimo, for Native Alaskans, Hawaiian or part Hawaiian for just people of Hawaiian descent. Son of a gun. 1965, the Immigration Nationality Act replaced a quota system that had favored some immigrants over others, often on racist basis since 1920s. The new system of preference emphasized skill-based immigration and family reunification instead. Lyndon B. Johnson signed a law in the Indian Civil Rights Act, which granted Native Americans many rights guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. In 1970, 2000, black, African American, or Negro. 2000 onward, Americans could be recorded as more than one race category in the consensus form. In addition to marking their own race categories in the consensus form, Americans could identify themselves as more than one race for the first time. Quote, some other race, unquote, became the third most chosen racial category after white and black. 2020, this will be the first consensus that won't rely on paper as a primary data collection. Instead, people will be encouraged to answer the consensus on the internet with phone and paper response available as a backup option. The controversial citizenship question was considered but ultimately rejected by the courts. Is this person a citizen of the United States? The question had never been asked. Many feared that it would discourage participation by minority and immigrant households. Spanish, Native Hawaiian, Guatemalan, Chamorro, Pacific Islander, other Asian. Damn.